Thanks, Lipperman. Honestly, it's just I have a really sore throat, but I drank a lot of tea and I took a lot of Advil, so hopefully I don't feel bad tomorrow. Alright, they're kind of stalling. Yeah, really nice movement. Are you in the Discord, Boulder? The 6683 stall right here, though. You guys see how they basically reduce range just ahead of the close? Look at this. I would expect a volatile move here into the close. Thank you. Well, we got snow today for the first time, so I think it's maybe just the change of weather. I feel like so far the reductions are specific to like the range that they've taken it down by, like close to like 17 to 20, 22 points. Do you guys see that? Otherwise they could have potentially pushed this a little bit further had they not reduced range both times here. Anyway, that was a really good area to at least have covered some. Contracts moved really nicely if you had traded that. I jumped in a little bit later on the 6670s, but I was able to capture a good trade on those. I've been trading Intel too. It kind of just came back. It did hold off that 34.32, but reversed a little bit. I think these contracts though I might hold. Bank of America is also having a decent recovery. I just want to see where where's my initial chart? Oh, also gold hit our 4131 today and held off 40.56, which I thought was important to share, guys. That's a really good hold on gold and a good break. Trying to find, where is the Intel chart? I don't know where my original template is. Anyway, when I find it, I'll let you guys know, but this was a good hold. Okay, let's see if they make a turnaround here. So my thoughts were that if they hold off this area here, which I'll discuss in a second, they could easily take this back to the zone into the close, and maybe just ahead of NVIDIA earnings is what we were thinking. The zone would be this area up here. So far they're stalling a little bit. And then another scenario was that they might just stall it and keep it in the means, or like consolidate core ranges, which it's not the worst case scenario. It's obviously we'd prefer though that they they keep it around core ranges or the zone instead of taking it back beneath 6666 and like this range in here. So these reductions definitely imply those 6720s. How much time do we have left? What do we have for time? Final 12 minutes. So probably want to be at least above 6666 before 350 if we're going to even have a shot at getting this range in here. Otherwise that could be done on the session today. There's actually a lot of cup and handles on some option chains right now too, which is interesting in heading into this close. 'Let's just set these alerts again. What do you guys think? Where do you think they're going to take this to into the close? How many people think that we actually have a shot at getting into the zone? 've tracked NVIDIA earnings a lot against ES. And we almost always are in a zone or a channel before they report. But so that being said, there's a chance that if they don't break obviously here, that they could take it back down to this area in here, right? Or try breaking up this area in here. I put up a poll, guys, if you want to participate. I didn't really like that they stalled the range right here though. Yeah, that would kind of kill like SPX calls. And you can kind of see what I was saying before. You definitely don't want it beneath like 6666 or 58 before 350. That's going to imply some volatility because then 350 is going to have a lot of pressure to retract back over 6666. We'll see if it holds the means though off 5-2. 5-2 hold at 350. 350 trying its best to retract back over 66. Still in the means though. So that being said, you have to have really good follow through sticks. Did you guys see how Google traded today too? It had a really strong morning and then got killed off, but that moved after yesterday's news. All right, so you have to have immediate follow through usually, especially if you stall right at the 50, like the 350 point in the day. Are you guys seeing the final second breaks right here? Hey, this gives an odd for them retracting at exactly 351. Can keep odds for 354, 355. That being said, though, you have to clear at least back to like here during this window to even have an odd of retesting this range for 55. Otherwise, you're going to keep this stuck. What did you guys vote? No? Okay. Interesting. How important do you guys think the 53 stick is here? Yeah, usually 353 is not super important, but because of where it's trading right here, this can help determine the kind of range we're going to get for 354, 355. Like you see how they're kind of just hovering 6666, 6668. That's not a coincidence. Like right in this range. You definitely want this to close at least over 68 to help the odds for 354, 355, or even at a minimum 66, but I feel like 68 would be better. You see how they're kind of keeping it just right in between? 6666.75. Not the most ideal for odds, but it could still try. Yeah, we could also just get a crazy end of day stick though too. We'll see how they turn this around off the 30 seconds here. This would be the 30-second potential turnaround. But I think to offset this, they'd have to get it over 6.8. I don't think that's high enough. You keep stalling 6.8. All right, let's see. Let's see what kind of range we can get for 55. I think because they kept it beneath 6.8 at 55, like before 55, probably won't have as high of odds of getting that break into this range in here, but we could look to see if they at least try testing the 70s, like 7.3, 7.4. What is this? No, it's just a test from the government. Okay, so 7.1. They're keeping this stuck at core ranges. This is where I expected us to stall though, core areas, right? That I figured if they hold those 20s, like this green area, they'd probably take it to this area in here with slight odds of getting into the zone, but we'll see. Maybe they do it like final minute, who knows. No, it is an emergency alert, but it's a fake one. Do you guys not have those in the States? Or like they alert everyone's phones if something happens? They're probably just testing it. These stalls guys at 77.1, they're keeping this like right in between. They're kind of keeping both sides open. I think because they held 5-2 though, that's good. Like at least into the close, but they're trying to limit the range a little bit here, which is fine, but we'll have to see what they do. Anyway, that's what we were looking for. So the long trade setup was get us back over the means and ideally core areas. If they can pin us there, that's great. If they can get us to the zone, that's even better, but those odds of that happening are pretty low. Seems like an after hours move, if anything, which makes sense if they're waiting for NVIDIA to report. You know what I mean? I'm gonna set some alerts on this one too. 35. How much time do we have left? 2 minutes. We'd still want to be above 6.6 though for 59. Like I think being in here is going to keep that volatility alive. And we'll see if it has enough momentum at least to get it back to like a somewhat safe range. We shall see. What do you guys think? Where do you think they're going to pin this? I wouldn't be surprised if we get a very big end of day stick. Today's that kind of day. If they're going to do something like that, it would make sense that they would do it on a day like today. Okay, they kept it right at 5.8 and above, beneath 6.6 at 6.1, so closing in the means that's for sure going to imply some volatility into the close here. So we'll end up seeing what NVIDIA has in store, but keeping it in between here kind of keeps, they kept both sides open, so they could still back test this area here, bring it back down here, and they could still also clear this area here. They basically tested both sides today, like both zones. Does that make sense? Like this zone in here and this zone up here. Usually when that happens, it implies that there could be some volatility in the after hours here. Okay, let me close this out. Yeah, or they could even just flatten it too if they wanted to, but I don't know. Usually NVIDIA earnings brings some sort of range. I guess we'll have to see. I held my Intel calls. I like the close on that. I do want to see though, like where my old template is, because this isn't, or my new one. This is my old one. Okay, you see that? Okay, what I was going to explain to you guys was yesterday. Thank you. Okay, so we're kind of stuck in a range right now where we don't really have any big flips until the 21st, okay? The 17th held range, okay? So 17th did not take out these lows right here, correct? So that was something that we had to kind of monitor and watch for, especially because this was like a 356 to 346 point hold. Do you guys see this from like that previous high on that stall right here? Do you guys see that? Here, look. Okay, so this is a really, really, really important area that we're kind of just ranging in right now, okay? Roughly like 346 to 356. When we looked at it from the actual ranges from the 17th, remember how I said they're barely holding like 356 points right here? Which would have put us at a really big risk if they took this beneath. And then when we went back and looked at it from this angle of things, this was kind of like the 128 to 132 point stall. So kind of like off this range right here. And they sustained those structures like on a 4-day. They didn't take out this low, okay, from the 5th. Correct? So this could invalidate this bear flag. Usually structures like this can continue for 3-4 bars. So they could invalidate this by the 21st. Do you see what I'm saying? If they can retract enough range. The first area that they'd probably have to retract is going to be probably close back to like 6697 and then maybe the 6740s, like back up in here. And hence there's some pressure on today's date. And also another reason why, it's not that it doesn't matter that we dropped yesterday, it's more so for like structural basis. It doesn't have as much of, kind of like when we dropped on the 10th, it's not that it didn't matter, it's just that we had odds to retrace back up by the 15th, 16th, 20th, 21st, 23rd, 24th. Do you get what I'm saying? It's the same idea here. You have odds to retrace up by the 21st. So the days that'll have the most pressure from the bull side of things would be the 19th, the 20th, obviously. Does that make sense? So that was mainly what I was looking at in terms of structure and why I felt like they could easily bring this back and retrace it. When I went and looked at it from this angle of things, I looked at like the lows they were holding. They were doing a really good job of holding the 33 to 34 point ratio off 2.8, and that's why I really liked that long setup in here. Do you see it? Yes. Do you see this? This hold right here? So this was a really good hold off yesterday's lows. They also did a good job of sustaining 88 points in real time today. They hit exactly 87 points. I'm like, okay, that's good. That was second, okay. This was, just mark these on here. From where they opened today, which was in the channel, which is not bad, but could obviously imply some volatility. They didn't quite get 68 points, but they did hit 66 off open today. So there was some overhead around 6709, 6710. Do you see that? Overnight though, when I was looking at this, okay, even like these areas here, when we had like these overnight holds, this is kind of where like structure was a little bit better, you could say, but I noticed that when they opened today, okay, do you see how they kind of held that 44 point range off open this morning? Right here? Do you guys see that? that implied that maybe we could see like an 88, 87 point overall range, okay, from based on where they held yesterday's lows to today's open from this area in here. So I kind of just went with an 88 point range for today's date. And then I think when we measured off yesterday's highs, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday's or the 17th highs, these areas were also like 132 to 128 points in range up in here. So that's why I figured maybe they stall that area to the close, and then off like these closing points. These were like the 66, 68 up in here. Okay, and then like the 88 point ranges back in here. So I figured that there's probably going to be a lot of support in this area. Do you guys see it? Like kind of like the 132. I just want to show you guys. 128. Okay. And that's why I kept longing this area here, okay? Whereas like this is like more like a 68 point range. And max, I didn't really want us going beneath like 88 points on the session though. Let me show you. Do you see that? Okay, this was kind of my max risk. I didn't really want us losing 66.10. This area in here. And they held that overnight. Back in here. That was from the close. Okay? So do you see how much support there is in this area here? Around the 66, 20s, and 30s? So it made sense to try some of the longs down here. This one was a good negation stick to bring it right back up, but I knew that this one wouldn't be as good of a move because it breached. Does that make sense? Like this one here, this was a more solid hold. Do you see why I sent it in the Discord saying I'm taking a long right here off 66.28? Do you see how like they sustained this area that time? So it had a better odd of actually holding. Does that make sense to you guys? And breaking. At least to get it back to those areas that we just talked about, which were the 7.8, 7.7, 7.1, these ranges in here. Those areas were calculated. And that would basically end up being like a core-to-core move from these areas in here. Okay, so they initially, I noticed that this range, even if you break 34 points, it would take out this lower high. So we already had odds at a minimum of getting like a 44 point structure break, which we did when we broke this stick right here. And then they started stalling a little bit. And core areas are usually how many points? How many points do we usually get if we break core ranges? How many points do we usually get if we break core areas, guys? Typically, it's a core-to-core move. No, 44 is wrong. These 20s are core areas. And the lower 30s are like higher 20s. What's a core-to-core break? Okay. Start memorizing this stuff. So I was looking for at least like 50 points, 51 points, 56 points on this break. Okay? Do you see that? That's a core-to-core move. Okay? That's why I was saying it this morning. If they hold these areas here, which are the 20s and like That's what can get us back to core areas into the close. And they did a decent job of holding core ranges today, but they obviously didn't pin it there. We'll see if they can bring it back up since they stalled. But that's the core to core move, because I figured if they do core to core, if you hold these core areas, okay, and then you get to these core areas, what would your next core break be? What offset? These holds right here could get us 67.20s, okay? So hence we have to really start paying attention, because they could trigger those by the 21st. Is everyone on the same page? And they came below 630. Well, they could have afforded to come below 630 and still hold, like, but I ideally wanted to hold like 2.8. I think it was like 5.5 to 5.75. It was almost the same offsets that we had yesterday. Remember the offsets that we had yesterday? Do you guys remember yesterday's offsets? 30? 30 what? I'm not sure what you mean. Yesterday's offsets. Okay. Are you guys listening? They were super obvious. So yesterday's offsets were what? What did they do yesterday? They held the zone, okay? Did they hold exact bottom of the zone at 666588? No. Are you looking? Pay attention to this. Okay, we had about a 5.5, 5.75 offset yesterday. So I figured, okay, if they're holding this range in here, we probably have some odds that if they recycle this to the upside, maybe we get this range above, okay? And we stalled the zone right here. Are you guys looking? This was the 88-point break. Okay, this was the offset. They gave us basically an extra 5.75 in range. Okay, due to us sustaining 5.75 down here. Are you looking? Off 88 points. This was yesterday's offset, and it kind of continued into today. We've had 5.75 offsets. And then they did the exact same thing back in here, because when I looked at this, I was like, remember when we did the short into the close? Back in here. Like especially off these lows. Do you see that? It wasn't exact. Okay, and when we measured it on the downside, did they break 66, 68 points? Are you guys still listening? Or did they do the same thing? That's why I figured yesterday they're probably not gonna, I don't think they're gonna hold exactly 66, 68 points. Do you see the offset? It was a common theme, and it was mostly because of where we opened. That's why I covered here. Okay, so these were really big areas into yesterday's close. And then when I like went back and looked at this, are you looking? this morning, okay, when they broke down this area here. So we already know that this was that 88-point hold. We already talked about that, but this was also, what else was that? So we already decided that market had odds to hold there because we could afford that little bit of risk beneath that we looked at this morning, right? Like they could take this back down to these areas here based off the closing range, so off that 9.6, 9.7, whatever that range was, right? Are you guys looking? What was the previous day's close? 6.696, 50, 6.697. Do you see how that offset's continuing? Do you guys see it or no? Look. Again. Isn't that interesting? And it's kind of been the same theme. So whether you take it off the 88-point ratio and subtract 83.5, okay? Or if you take it from the differential between the area that you would have preferred to have, like if you broke yesterday, so off of here, okay, 68 points. There's two ways of looking at it. Either 68 points from highs, 88 from close. Both would have given you that 5.575 or 5.5 offset here. Do you see it? Like, let's mark these. Isn't that insane? And that was kind of the theme for the entire session. So hence this area was okay to hold. And they kind of continued the same thing today, where even though 2.8 was a little bit more ideal, we had that 5.75 offset. Do you see it? Do you guys understand this concept or no? Like, I want to show you guys how this is continuing from yesterday. It's the exact same thing. Like, we wanted to ideally hold close to 2.8, but we could afford that 5.75 offset because that's been the common theme for the past few sessions and this entire week. Oh, they can extend, but I find that it depends on like where you open the month, where you open the week, where you close. And I could already tell that that was going to be the case even based on where they kept opening, closing. Like we wanted 01, or 99, they gave us 96. You know what I mean? We wanted 05, 06, they gave us 01. Like you can just tell by these structures. So these offsets are still, they're still there. And it made sense too based on the overall range from when I measured this low to the November 17th highs, like 261. What's 261? Subtract 5.5 or 5.75. Wow, look at that break, guys. Of course they did it after the 15 minutes closed. What would that be? Think about this. So on a wider range, it's actually there. That offset is there, if you think about it, from these wider spots. Do you see that? You're paying attention? That's the 256. They're ranging around 261 off this candle's low to the 17th high. 17th a calculated date. Does that make sense? Do you see how this is coming in right here? Do you get it? They're offsetting 256 points by 5.5, 5.75. Really nice structure breaks here into the close. I think that they could give us the retest of that we needed for today, which was at 6697. And I also wanted to see if we would try getting core areas today. They don't have to do it today, but I figured that was going to be the best case scenario for us if they did. Do you see where the offset can come in? Boulder off like a wider range. We got zone re-entries, guys, for ahead of tomorrow, which is really good because we want to try triggering 6720s tomorrow, 6730s ahead of the 21st. That's going to help us negate a lot of this risk that we have and get rid of these ugly 3-bar patterns. 1, 2, 3. This is a really good example, guys, of how you can exhaust on a 3rd bar versus the 4th due to this being an invalid structure on a wider time frame. So even though this is valid on the daily because it took out the lows, are you guys listening? Like, even though this is technically valid because you took out these lows, this bar is valid for continuation. On a wider frame, it's not because we didn't take out the lows here. Do you see what I'm saying? Ahead of the 17th. Does that make sense? So this wouldn't be a valid continuation bar. This is why I said we could, instead, the 4-day could turn into a nice negation pattern. And they would basically just offset risk for next week. Kind of like a back and forth between structures, which is why the 19/20th has so much pressure ahead of the 21st. Because otherwise this could have continued to be a continued downside cycle for 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4. And then this would be like a 4-bar continuation. Does that make sense to you guys? So this overrides the daily, obviously. And the reason why this is so important is because the 17th is linked back to this, okay? Hence, if you measure from the 17th highs to the 10th lows, it's a 256-point range. And right now it's currently 261.5. So that 5.75 offset is there off 256. Do you understand what I'm saying? And we've seen it, like, for the last few sessions since the 17th. I just gave you guys 5 examples of it. So hence the goal would be that at the very least now we want to try getting back. I did a one-on-one session yesterday and we talked about this, but ideally we want to get back over 6697. That's the 50% range, okay? So, and it's funny because that would just take us back to basically, that would just take us back to the 17th close, right? Like around 9.7. Do you guys see that? Can you see that? Off those lows? But that's what's going to help us avoid getting back to this candle as early, because it's not just getting back there. It's the fact that if we did, this would run down into month end, like all the way through the 28th through December 4th, which can cause a lot of volatility for mid Q4, right? And into OPEX week. So negating today was crucial. Hopefully they can close us in the zone though, so that we have odds of getting, like when I drew this yesterday, I drew the 2 green candles like this, and then I drew this candle like this. Because if they can break us back like this, it basically would get us back to the 50% range from the 17th. Does that make sense? Or you can look at it as like getting back to potentially here, which is where they stalled highs on the 17th. Like if you measure this high to the 17th close, you have those odds at 6799. I don't think we'll get back to here tomorrow, but maybe by the 24th, like if they can push enough range. The idea is to get back to mid-supply. So the reason I like these patterns is because they do a great job of showing you a mid-range supply, okay? So like this would be like the mid-range supply right here, okay? And the nice thing is this time it's very small, like the range is very tiny, it's right in the means, but getting back there is what could basically offset volatility. And I would bet anything that that's probably half the range between here and here, like is right around these mid-range supplies. right in the means. So like close to like this area here. Does that help you guys understand this trade a little bit better? It is a very advanced analysis on it just because you have to kind of override certain things, just like how back here the 10th dropped, yes, but we had odds for bullish action for this 15th, 16th, 24th, 23rd, 20. Do you get what I'm saying? It just offsets it, which it's kind of like a filler day. So it's not like the 18th dropping doesn't matter. Of course it matters, but this is like it could be a void candle. Does that make sense? These are technically voided candles. Like they can void because there wasn't a structural time importance for that date. Does that make sense? There also wasn't a structural time importance for the 18th. And it's so strange because we barely had any flips on the 18th. We had flips on the 17th, 21st. Okay, so the earlier you drop, the better, because then you have now pressure to retrace. You always want to drop early, not late, because if you didn't drop here, but then you drop today, that's bad, because now you're getting way too close to the 21st, and now there's way more pressure to come back up, right? Whereas dropping on the 18th is better, because then you have at least a chance of coming back up on the 19th and the 20th. You have 2 days, right, versus just the one. So how high of pressure do you think we have now, guys, for the 20th to at a minimum close above 669798 and get back in the zone? So the 20th, we ideally want to be back in the zone. That was my analysis for tomorrow. So if we have a very small zone day tomorrow, I don't really care. If they get us back in the zone, that's all I really would want, to be honest with you. So oh, I did this backwards. 6. Oops. Okay, so if we have a day like this tomorrow where we're back in the zone and we're just nesting in this little zone, that is going to be the best for our odds. If they can bring it back to the channel, that's even better, because then we have at least odds of even trying to get to the 50s and 60s as early as the 21st, but it's not necessarily required. We just want to try like de-risking a little bit. Okay, so hence holding core areas this week or today are so important, like holding these 20s today. So this is the area we want to get back to for tomorrow. Okay, and that was my plan for the 20th, is hopefully we can get back to the zone and at least pin back over 9.7. Hence they're stalling 9.6 here. Do you see it? Isn't that crazy that they're stalling 9.6? It's like they know that that's the overhead. And they also know that they're not technically required to close there today. they have that pressure more so for tomorrow. So these would be the ideal ranges we want to get back to tomorrow. Thank you. All right, that's the best I can explain it. I did do a one-on-one session yesterday that was recorded, and he gave me permission if I want to post that. It's a bit more detailed than this, and it talked about exactly what happened today, like holding these 20s, breaking back up to the zone, renegating by the 20th, but hopefully this at least helps you see that. So when you have days like this, the action can be very back and forth, and it's really, really annoying. If he's okay with it, yeah. But do you see what I'm saying? So at the very least, I have a general rule that if you star reverse, you want to get back at least half the range, but ideally 75 to 66%. So, and this candle closes on the 20th. So these would be the ideal areas we want to get back to. At a minimum, back to 6697. Ideally back in this area here. And do you see how that 66 is right at the zone? So then your candles could look something like this. Okay? And then that would give you maybe some odds over a 4-day period if you closed in here to maybe get back to this mid-supply, because this is the mid-supply that's keeping us at risk right now, this area here. Does that make sense? This range in here, that's the area that is keeping the market conflicted. And you would have until month end to do that if that was the case. Otherwise, you're going to be back at risk of that continuation pattern, which would probably just extend on a wider frame. I would imagine like maybe like a 7-day or 8-day or something. And then I think we also have a lot of patterns that flip over on the 21st, like the 7-day could negate by the 21st. Okay, these ones could come back and potentially flag even, because this has until the 24th, right? Which is a lot of time. Technically, if they wanted to engulf by the 24th, I don't see how that can't be a probability. Maybe it could. That would kind of be a far-fetched, because I would be taking out highs as early as the 23rd, which is next week's a short week for Thanksgiving, so I don't think so. I feel like a lot of these are just going to be some star-like patterns to save range, save face, but maybe the 10-day by like the 2nd. But do you see how we're kind of stuck in a doji now? If they really want to delay things, they would maybe just even wait until, see, this is a good break right here. They might even just doji this and wait until the 2nd through the 16th for like end of year and maybe OPEX or contract rollover on the 16th, 17th. And that would just be like staying back and forth from now until the 2nd. But do you see how we can determine that depending on what they do by the 21st and 24th? Does that make sense? Like we should have an idea if they're going to keep us stuck like this until the 2nd based on what they do on the 21st and 24th. Like we should have an idea if we're going to stay stuck and maybe have better odds for December instead. So far, our first condition is being met. We're getting back to 6697. Okay, if we close there, that's even better. Ideally, we want to close closer to 99 from the zone theory, because that's where I would have preferred we had closed before. Or, Boulder, are you listening? Offset that 5.75. Does that make sense? So if they maybe close this closer to 02 area, that can help offset this continued confliction that we have. So very, very good close here, guys. This is exactly where we want to be heading into tomorrow. I think a close over 6699 is going to be best case for us, because that's what we wanted previously and we couldn't quite get that. A more calculated area would be closer to 0250, 0275, because that could maybe offset those 5 points. So we'll see if they can get us to close somewhere in between here. Same conditions as we had previously. And there is a big cup and handle, like I said, on those option chains. I did see them. So some of those Friday calls had massive cups. So maybe they take them up. All right, any questions, guys, before I sign off? I just wanted to cover this so that you guys know. So we know that now there's maybe odds that they can keep this sideways until the 2nd, relative to conditions that are being met for the 20th, 21st, 24th. So if today's already closing at 6698, that's good. If tomorrow gets to 6731, that's even better. Okay, then that's reducing our odds of getting stuck until month end. And then that would increase our odds of maybe getting back to this area in here. Even if they do nothing, even if they just take it back here, okay, to keep it stuck for like until end of month, I don't really care. At least it offsets some of this risk. Does that make sense? And then that way we might have odds of like retesting highs for the last part of the year. The most bullish scenario is to engulf by the 24th. I feel like they can't do that unless they take out, they'd have to take out this area tomorrow, and they'd have to probably clear this range back into the zone as early as the 21st. Okay, because otherwise that's going to be pretty hard to take out highs as early as then, because the 24th is Monday. That only gives us 1, 2, 3 days, right? I highly doubt that. The only other scenario would be by the 28th, which we had some setups on like the 9-day, I think. What was it, the 9 or the 8? I don't remember what it was, but we did have some setups that could bring it back by, I think it was this. This could engulf by like the 28th. And this flipped on the 11th, so your mid frame is going to be between the 11th and 28th. So let's see. What's the median between the 11th and 28th? And the 11th is when we last stalled 6888. That's when we failed to enter the zone at 6888. So maybe the condition would be that you'd have to enter the zone by the midpoint. That's the all-time high zone. And the midpoint between the 11th and 28th is going to be probably here. So 12 bars, so 6 bars. 6 bars would be here. 17 days. So yeah, the pressure is between here and overnight price action. These are the mid sessions today and tomorrow. Does that make sense? That can give you odds to maybe engulf by the 28th. I think that those odds are pretty low, but I'll just share them anyway, because the first thing you'd have to do is get back into the zone. But that would be a very bullish move if they did something like that, because then they'd be required to get back, like I said, to at least here, and then probably have to push these ranges here. And we also have a short week next week. That's another reason I don't think that they would do that, and another reason I think that they could just keep us sideways and delay until this period here. Does that make sense? Kind of just like keep us in between. We could also still have a bear continuation too if they don't retract tomorrow. So they did good today, but there's a lot more pressure for tomorrow's date, I would say. Because when I went back and looked at some of these, like these are not like vivid bear flags, but still, the 6 day is something that's concerning because this could flip bearish on the 28th. Okay, so I'm watching some wider structures from now till the 28th just to see if this ends up becoming a bear flag, okay? Because this is from the 11th through the 28th, and we already determined that today's the midpoint between the 11th and 28th. So far it's tracking okay, and this flipped on the 19th, so you could maybe use this 6 day as the median between those wider frames. And that also flips on the 16th, which was that bigger pattern that we looked at on the 4 day, right? If they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bars that continued. So the theme, I think, is back and forth, and I think it remains that way until one end breaks. And for now, the bigger sides breaking are this zone up here or this zone beneath here. Okay, so 6888, 6588. Do you see that? This is essentially the range that we're stuck in. Right in between here. It's about 300 points. Okay? And if you want to measure from actual ratios, it's close to 346. Okay, this is recorded, so you guys can go back and watch. Crypto's just been in a downturn, but the big support that we have on Bitcoin is 87,525 and 86,323. This is kind of the area that if they hold here, they can retract back to 100K, but if they break down this range, it'll go all the way back to 81,000. So it's getting, and this is a really ugly pattern here too, so. And that was after we stalled that 126 area. But this is a big spot right here. Oh, it hasn't quite hit that yet. And I think, I don't remember the days that we were measuring on Bitcoin, but I feel like it, didn't we say it moves in like 9 to 11 day increments or something like that? Let's see, from, yeah, like 9 to 11, okay. Do you see that from here? And then when structure broke right here, do you see this low? So you can manually just measure those, but Bitcoin you usually use in about 9 to 11 days. Okay, and this is probably where they couldn't clear or break right here. This, like this lower high in here, and hence they had that bigger reversal down here, and it looks like they tried holding here, but they broke down early, so that makes this valid. This was a valid bear continuation because they broke down range. But if you were to measure from, let's see, here, like from here, today could be the final break. Does that make sense? So it's not actually measuring from these lows right here. These ones gave it continuation. It's more calculated off of the 8th, which is aligned with today. So today's probably the earliest day that it could test this calculated range. Do you see that? This is calculated, this area here. This is linked to this area here. These areas are linked to this area here. So, and that's the first day it's closing beneath that. And then if you measure it from the actual high range, maybe that could be the time frame that it would have to reverse by. So there's some pressure on Bitcoin between the 19th and 22nd off this area here. Like in between here. I'll just share that for you guys. 150 by year end. They're not going to get 150 unless they hold this area down here though. And 126 was a huge overhead. So is this 129. There's a lot of overhead in here. I think if Bitcoin nests around these areas into end of year, like between here, this is fine. It looks like we're setting up, guys, to get that close. So maybe write this down in Discord. Izzy wants to see us close at 6,699. Ideally 6,702.5 or 7.5, since that could be the 5.5 to 5.75 offset. And this could set us up to get the ranges that we really want to see overnight, which is retesting 67.10, 67.14, and then ideally getting 6718, 6722. So overnight conditions, if we can pin above 6699, ideally closer to 6702, 670275, retest 6708, 6710 neutral range, retrace 6718 area, 6720, 6722 remains major target for the 20th. If can retrace, we're looking for 6731, 6733 for tomorrow, with the channel being an odd at 6744, 6748 retest. Okay, those are the conditions for overnight. There's going to be a report out tonight too, if you guys want it tonight. Do you guys want it tonight or tomorrow? I think they're going to close this area here. Like, this looks pretty promising. This can really help us if they do that. Another thing that they could do is if they offset off highs, they could actually end up closing. I didn't think that they would do this, but if they closed 5.75 above highs, they could close at 57.14, which is above the neutral zone. That would be the obviously best case scenario, but they'd have to really move this into the close. I think just keeping it in here is fine, though. 670275 seemed the most calculated area to pin us, but we'll see. offset is. Okay. I'm